Members of the panel on Home Affairs, Culture and Sports, good afternoon. It's the appointed time. We have a quorum. I call to order the meeting of the panel. Agenda item number 1, information papers issued since the last meeting, the details of which are set out in the agenda. Would members please note that? The second agenda item is items for discussion at the next meeting. We have the outstanding items for discussion and the follow-up action lists. The next regular meeting will be held between 4:30 and 6:30 p.m. on 11th of May on Monday. The first item proposed to be discussed by the administration is regulatory arrangements for amusements with prizes licenses, which have been covered in news reports a lot lately. The second agenda item is safeguarding and transmission of intangible cultural heritage items and promotion of Chinese culture. If members do not object to the proposed arrangement, we will discuss the two items. Let's move on to the third agenda item. I would like to welcome the Secretary for Labor and Welfare and his team. We are to discuss the arrangements of the Community Care Fund. The Secretary for Labor and Welfare would actually regularly report to the panel on the arrangements of the Community Care Fund. Members who wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. I will also ask Mr. Chris Sun to give a brief presentation. Thank you. As at the end of February 2026, I would like to report to members that for healthcare, education, housing, and welfare, the Community Care Fund launched 82 projects and benefited over 4 million people. The details of the programs, members will refer to Annexes 1 and 2 of the paper for those. The government has already regularized 25 of the programs that have been confirmed to be effective. Since our last report, the Commission on Poverty implemented some new programs. For example, the community living rooms in Wong Kok, Yamate, Chun Wen, West Sai Wen, Kwai Chung, and Sai Ying Pun. There are also some specific special allowances provided. We have for healthcare approved some new drugs and medical devices. We have introduced 5 self-financing cancer drugs as well as included new clinical indications for 5 existing drugs. We have also provided for ultra-expensive drugs program, a new clinical indication for an existing drug, as well as improve the clinical adoption criteria. We have now the ultra-expensive drug program covering 11 drugs, subsidizing public hospital patients who are eligible to have 5 new medical devices. For details, please refer to the specific contents in the paper. We have here today representatives from different policy bureaus and organizations. We're more than willing to answer the questions of members. As this is the first report given by the Community Care Fund in this legislative term, we have representatives from different bureaus, such as the Labor and Welfare Bureau, of course, as well as those from the Housing Bureau, Home and Youth Affairs Bureau. We also have those from the Social Welfare Department, as well as 2 representatives from the Hospital Authority. We also have a representative, a project manager from the Hong Kong Dental Association, Mr. Clement Ng. I believe we have different officers here that should be able to cover questions in different areas asked by members. Let me read out the order in which members are going to speak. Ms. Maggie Chen, Dr. Alvin Lee, Mr. Adrian Ho, Mr. Albert Trong, Mr. Ken Wong, Mr. Vincent Ching, and myself being the last member to speak. Ms. Maggie Chen, I'll assign a format time limit, questions and answers included. I want to ask about the CSSA Residential Care Services Scheme in Guangdong. So this program was launched in October 2025. As at 28th of February, we have 5 beneficiaries, and the allowances disbursed is $625,000, but the total funding is $128.16 million. Why is there such a large gap between the allocated funding and the amount disbursed? Are there some difficulties that have caused such a low number of beneficiaries, there being only 5 beneficiaries? I also want to ask about the maintenance mediation pilot scheme. As at 28th of February 2026, we have 281 cases that benefited from the arrangements. The amount disbursed is $5.51 million, so each case it is $19,800 approximately. So is it the case that it is used for mediators and there were many rounds of mediation, or is that used elsewhere? Mr. Chris Sun, I will provide a brief response and then I'll ask those from the Social Welfare Department to provide additional information. The scheme mentioned by the member is actually a pilot arrangement for those who are not eligible for public services in Hong Kong, so they are living in either private institutions or not so adequate environments. We expect them to be receiving quite a hefty CSSA payment in Hong Kong, so we want to provide them with options in Guangdong so that they can test out this option. I do note the results so far, but we need to understand the fact that in the beginning we may need some time to convince the elderly persons. There may be more today. It has been some time since there was the last cutoff. I would just say it takes time for elderly persons to change their habits. We'll see what happens in 6 months, but I do admit the take-up rate is not as expected. We do understand the living condition would significantly improve if they move to Guangdong, but elderly persons choose not to go still. We will try to see how we can encourage elderly persons to move to Guangdong even more. I will now ask the Social Welfare Department representative to supplement information. We have for the target group, including those who are non-frail elderly persons receiving CSSA payments. We do note the situation, as the Secretary said. We are trying to do more in promotion for the target group. We will hold visits for them to get a better understanding. We also want to answer the questions that they have so that they have better understanding to make their decisions. How about the maintenance program? Who's going to answer this question? Yes, Mr. Paul Wong. I do note for the $19,000 odd, a lot of them go into mediation, but some is used for publicity and promotion costs of the particularly particular organization, so not all $5 million would be on specific mediation arrangements on the cases. Thank you, Dr. Alvin Lee. We have the Community Care Fund benefiting 4 million odd people, and we have now 20 programs being regularized. It helps in poverty alleviation, healthcare, and education. I have two questions. One is on the sustainability of Community Care Fund and resource allocation. The annual expenditure is approximately $1.2 billion. Right now, we can use funds of $6.9 billion, so it can last for another 5 to 6 years. Roughly, we have new programs such as the scheme on light public housing. The funds are not unlimited. We really need to make sure in resource allocation the operations can be sustainable. Will we give priority to recurrent programs? That's my first question. On community living rooms, you can see with its launch in 2023, many of the arrangements will last for 3 to 5 years, but this is not a regular project still. The project has been received quite well. Is it possible for us to regularize the project? What criteria will we adopt in thinking whether to regularize the program? Also, with the basic housing units laws being passed, will there be an impact on transitional housing, like public housing, and by extension, community living room projects? Thank you, Mr. Chrisson. The first question on the sustainability of Community Care Fund is very important. The balance of the Community Care Fund is now at $6.9 billion. How long it can last will depend on whether there are new programs, whether we can deploy internal resources, and other factors. And according to our internal assessments, with the $6.9 billion balance, even without further injections, it can last for approximately 4 years. In future, we will continue to review how we can have sustainable operations of the Community Care Fund. Right now, we think the finances are quite healthy. If we can deploy internal resources, we will try to regularize the community living room projects. We have piloted the projects under Community Care Fund for the exact purpose of trying to test out the waters. And if we have an alternative financing model, we can really think about this. It has not been long since we launched the community living room projects, and as we see the living situation develops, we see with more different housing arrangements, we should see a decrease in demand for community living room projects. We think right now, with our current practice with the enterprise support and NGOs operating the community living rooms, we can be more flexible. It has been 3 years odd since its launch, and we have 12 community living rooms. We'll see if we can allocate suitable resources in future. Mr. Adrian Ho, thank you, Chair. I have 4 questions. The Secretary said 25 projects have been regularized. I want to ask what criteria the government adopts in phasing out certain programs and what programs are to be regularized. I also want to ask about the elderly dental assistance program. On 1st of January 2016, we have stopped receiving applications under the Community Care Fund. The Department of Health took over. How can we make sure there is no gap in provision of services, and will there be changes in coverage, subsidies, and application threshold? I also want to ask about the ultra expensive drugs program. In the first phase, we have covered 17 cancer drugs. As we see new drugs being introduced, what will be the changes in the commitment of the fund? Will we set some cap? Will we introduce copayment basis by the drug pharmaceutical companies? I also want to ask about approval processes of new drugs. We can have a simplified process for introducing new drugs. What is the approval criteria adopted? How can we make sure patients of different diseases can receive fair treatment? Mr. Kristen.
4分鐘。
Well, I only have 4 minutes, so I'll speak faster. And then for the 3 questions, I'll ask my colleagues to answer. As to when they're going to be made regular assistance service, well, first, we'll have to be sure about the effectiveness. Second, we will have to have the resources available before we can consider making them regular assistance service. So I'll defer to my colleagues for the other questions. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, to answer the members' questions just now, first of all, with regard to the community dental assistance scheme, well, the coverage is that we have already covered all those who are eligible for the CCF dental assistance program, and also we have also broadened the scope so that new groups would be covered, including those who are under 65. But then, if they are eligible, for example, if they are from the disadvantaged groups, they have financial difficulties, and also we have also extended that to those homeless people. And also for the service scope, it's very similar to the previous CCF program. Thank you. Anything that you'd like to add, or are you going to defer to the HA to answer? Yes. With regard to the ultra expensive drugs, we have 17. We have 11 now, and then in the first phase, 7 would be cancer drugs. And also, as to the criteria for approval, well, first of all, we have the established mechanism under the HA, and then we would also be making recommendation to the committees, and also with the specialist support, there would be regular reviews and assessments, in particular for those new drugs that have been approved, and they would also be looked at the clinical indication, and also there would also be the HA safety net. If they are covered, then they would also be eligible. We would also be catching up with time by conducting review on a regular basis. It has to be evidence-based. We would also have to consider the efficacy and also the effectiveness of the drugs. We would also be making international recommendations and practices, and also specialists and experts' advice, and we will have to make sure that the platform will be used fairly and squarely. Thank you. Next, Mr. Albert Chuang. I have 2 questions. First is about the school after school care service. So how many schools are participating? According to the records that I've checked, well, it started in 2024, and then in 2025 it continued. It showed that it's quite effective. But then, according to some feedbacks, well, some schools, because of one reason or another, they don't want to be labeled, and therefore they don't want to take part in this scheme. So I'd like to know from the administration as to how you can encourage more schools to take part in this program. That's the first question. Secondly, well, there are many organizations that have introduced this youth living room projects. It's very similar to the community living room program, and according to what they said, they have not been able to get the support from the CCF. So I'd like to ask the Bureau whether or not for such youth living room project, can that also be covered by the CCF pilot program? Thank you. Bureau Director. Thank you, Mr. Chuang, for your question. With regard to after-school care service, I'll ask my colleague to answer. But then I can also briefly talk about what you're worried about, that is the labeling effect or stigmatization. Well, I've heard some people say that in particular for those schools at the top of the list, they don't want to take part because they don't want to be labeled. But then I think that has basically gone, because we are all we are quite used to that. And after the chief executive has visited one of those schools, I think there has been extensive reports in the community, and there is no restriction or limitation whatsoever. We'd like to encourage as many schools or primary schools as possible to take part. If everybody takes part, then there'll be no labeling whatsoever because we can see the benefits. But then for the actual figures, I'll defer to my colleague. With regard to the school-based after-school care service, well, for the 25-26 school year, we have already opened that to 18 districts, and we have also eliminated the cap for schools to take part. We have 207 schools taking part in this program this year. Basically, whoever applies would be accepted. Thank you. Mr. Chuang also referred to this youth living room project. I am very pleased to hear that you welcome the idea of the community living room. I think this is a very innovative idea. Well, my understanding is that the youth living room should be more simple because they don't have to do laundry, they don't have to do cooking whatsoever, and therefore the size of the living room does not have to be that big. And then if there is a project which you'd like the CCF to cover, then you would have to approach a particular department or a bureau. You will have to get its support. And then they will have to open a file, and then you will see whether or not we can have appropriate projects for coverage. For example, the L&F Bureau would be working with the SWD in introducing the community living room project. We would also have to set out the basic requirements. We have to have the laundry room, we have to have the living room, and also the kitchen, and how much will be chipped by the community, how much will be paid for by the government. And then we will have to develop a project like that. So there has to be a proponent. We also have to have the support from a particular department or bureau. We are more than happy to consider those ideas. So we have an open mind. It's not just something that is cooked up by the administration itself. We have to have ideas from the community, and then we will be more than happy to consider them. What about the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau? Would you like to respond to that also, because it's about youth? Yes, of course, that's also a very important part of our work, and therefore I can also take it up with Mr. Chuang as to how this works. But then one of the objectives of the CCF is to help those with financial difficulties, and therefore we will see how we can work together and see how we can help these targets. Thank you. Next, Mr. Ken Wong. Thank you, Chairman. I have two questions. Well, in 5A, is about the community living room project. Well, 6 more districts have been included, so $164.18 million will be covered. I'd like to know the content of this, and also the opening hours and so on. So how can you ensure that the coverage would be adequate, so that for subdivided flats households, they would be benefiting, and there will be no duplication of resources and so on? You also talk about the like public housing households. You have this special allowance for them, and then you expect to increase the amount by $57.05 million. So what about the eligibility and also the disbursement procedures? Would that be streamlined? And also, when will they be able to start making applications? Well, Chairman, first on the community living room project, I'll defer to the SWD's Deputy Director. Well, for the CLR idea, so it's not just initiated by the government. We have to have a tripartite collaboration. We have to get the venue. We also have to get rent-free accommodation, and then we don't have to renovate the area. And we would also have to have them set up in districts where there are more subdivided flats, and also the rents would also be different, because if the size is larger, then it will be able to take care of more people, and then we'll be prepared to pay more. And also the opening hours would be the same. So the Assistant Director can also explain in greater detail to you. Well, the nature of that is that it has to be open around the 365 days a year, except for number 8 typhoons and so on, and it would also be open until the small hours in the morning. Yes. Well, for the CLR project, the service coverage is the same. That is it will be open around the year, except for inclement weather, and also for the daily opening hours. It will be open from 11 to 11 p.m. And then for the coverage, well, depending on the size of the area, the scale of operation might be somewhat different. But then basically, there are three main areas that they will have to provide services. First, they will have to provide an additional living space so that subdivided unit households would be able to enjoy. For example, kids will have a place to do their homework, and there would also have to be kitchens or cooking areas for families to prepare their dinners and so on. And there are other facilities that would be necessary, for example, self-help laundry areas. They would also have to have shower rooms, so that's the living space that will have to be provided by the CLR project. Also, we would also require CLR to provide community support for members. For example, homework assistance or guidance, and also some provision of information for their daily lives. And also, they would also have to cater for their individual needs and make referrals so that they can get different services. And also, it's about community sharing. So we would also encourage them to work with the business sector and local groups so that they can work with the CLR and then provide support, for example, volunteer service, and also non-cash donation and so on. So these are the three main areas that would be covered by each and every CLR project. Well, can I also ask the Housing Bureau to explain a bit further about the light public housing issue? Yes, for the trial scheme on special allowance for households of light public housing, well, we are going to expand it or extend it for another year. So we have covered some 30,000 units in 13 housing estates. Well, the nature has not changed so long as the households have been found eligible, then they would be eligible for this subsidy. And because of the rising living cost, well, depending on the size of the family and also the location where they live, they would be getting about $1,950 all the way to over $10,000. And there is no restriction as to how many times they can get. They can use that to buy furniture items. They can also buy some textbooks for their kids and so on. So that's the eligibility and also the use of the trial scheme. Next, Mr. Vincent Cheng. Thank you, Chairman. I'm also interested in the CLR project because over the past few years, I think I've been heavily involved in this project because in Yau Chi Mong and other districts, that they have been very helpful to the subdivided flat households, and they've also been able to use them in order to meet their daily needs. We have also attempted to enhance the registration of subdivided household residents and so on. I hope that the CLR can play a bigger role. Other than providing community support, they can also encourage these households to move to better districts, and also they can also do registration so that they can be eligible for light public housing. I understand that because this is a tripartite project and we have already built a very good brand, I understand that many in the business sector would also like to support this. And therefore, I'd like to know from the Bureau as to whether or not we have enough number of such CLR, or is it that it's about time for us to turn to other projects? Because what I've been thinking is that when I go to the CLR, I can see that the kitchen is a very good place because through working in the kitchen, they can also relax themselves and so on. So can we have an enhanced version of CLR so that we can have community kitchens and so on? And also, after all, the CLR is basically there to serve the subdivided flat residents. But then what about those living in the neighborhood? They are also grassroots, but then they would be denied such an opportunity of getting the service. And therefore, we can have an enhanced version so that these grassroots can also benefit. So can we also consider that?
Secretary, thank you, Mr. Vincent Cheng, for his support in the past 3 years. Starting from the first community living project in Sham Shui Po, he was highly involved, as he said. I would say, apart from the 3 functions mentioned by the Assistant Director, as Mr. Vincent Ching said, we had helped households turn over, move on to public housing. Regarding his first question, whether we have set a cap on the number of community living room projects, we don't. As long as those who are willing to help, they can have their own locations and they have done decorations, perhaps with support of donations, we will provide support to them under the Community Care Fund. We will definitely have more community living room projects, especially in areas that we don't have community living rooms, such as Yunlong and North District. We very much want to have community living rooms there. We have already been expanding in, say, Kwaichong and Chunwen. We also welcome more community living room projects in where we have existing coverage, because it is always nice to increase the numbers. As for whether we will relax the criteria for community living room membership, we'll explore this, but right now we remain prudent because there are still other grassroots, and we do understand there is great demand. We have seen other programs providing support not just to subdivided unit tenants. I think this is something we can look at. We will discuss with Mr. Vincent Ching after the meeting about this, perhaps. Before the last member asks questions, I will deal with some housekeeping matters. We have 3 members waiting to speak, Ms. Nixie Lam, Mr. Chris Ip, and myself. And we have Ms. Maggie Chan wanting to speak for the second round. If members want to speak for the second round or ask questions for the first round, I will draw the line after Ms. Nixie Lam speaks. After we have all members spoken, we'll move on to the second agenda item. Ms. Nixie Lam. Thank you, Chair. We have, as other members said, some very popular, favorable responses of community living room projects. We have some training provided in community living rooms. We also have some festive occasions being celebrated in community living room projects. And we have seen 2,360 subdivided unit households will be benefited, and every year they will service approximately 374,000 people. We have some new community living room projects. We also have some existing community living room projects. We have performance indicators for community living rooms to gauge the usage rate and how satisfied people are and how much we are improving the household's living quality as well as those of children. If we can measure these, that will definitely help. Secretary. Thank you, Ms. Nixie Lam. I will perhaps ask the Assistant Director to supplement information. We have engaged the Polytechnic University to help us follow up on the effectiveness of the projects. We did the same for poverty alleviation projects such as the Strive for Rise program. It's because we want to have a scientific basis to gauge whether we have achieved our policy intent, and I can assure you we have met all the policy indicators. The Polytechnic University told us we have helped the subdivided unit households a lot in socialization. Some women actually said they have seen great life improvement because they can cook in a community kitchen, they can talk to people, they are much happier. at an appropriate timing, we can perhaps disclose or report findings. I will see if Assistant Director can share with you information on usage rate. We have actually seen an over demand for we have results that surpass many KPIs. I'll now ask the Assistant Director to speak. We have met the KPIs and we have 70% of the members said there is an improvement in terms of living space, sense of belonging, as well as interpersonal relationships. And as the Secretary said, we have engaged a team from PolyU to study what kind of improvement or if there is improvement experienced by the households, and we have been told we met the KPIs. We have 4 community living room projects that have been in operation for over a year. We can see for each of the 4 community living rooms, we have seen the targets met for the number of members, but because they are of different scales, I will not share with you the particular figures for each community living room. As for service attendances, we have also seen the eventual figures surpassing performance indicators, so we can see the community living room projects are very popular among subdivided unit households. Mr. Chris Ip. Thank you, Chair. Many members asked about community living room projects. I support the program. I just have some questions on figures. As at February this year, we have 82 projects, 4 million beneficiaries, and we have the balance being $280 million. And if we deduct the unpaid commitments, we have in balance $6.9 billion. And according to last year's paper, we have in the balance $6.3 billion, and we have $400 million for, say, different income. We have seen a reduction of commitment in the end. Is it because we have regularized certain projects, or did we see a reduction in projects, or did we see a reduction in the number of beneficiaries? That's my first question. We had the Secretary respond to a question on the number of years programs are to be in operation. I want to now ask if there is some way for us to increase the balance by expanding the income sources of Community Care Fund. Secretary, we make annual reports on the commitment and the balances of Community Care Fund. There are ups and downs. Right now, it's $6.9 billion, the balance. We can't really explain in great detail what is happening. Perhaps we can provide supplementary information after the meeting. But the picture is clear. We have covered the commitments, the projects to be completed, the recurrent projects. The cash flow changes are all accounted for, so it is clear that we have a balance of $6.9 billion. Before, there was a question on the sustainability of the operations, and it is estimated we have the balance lasting for approximately 4 years. We will indeed see a decrease in balance in future. We can't really put all of our cash with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, because if we put it with the HKMA, it will be locked for 6 years. So for the $6 billion, including the unpaid commitments, so that would mean for an additional amount of money, there's not much in option we can invest in. We can really think about what we can do with the funds in the 4 years. We will focus on making good use of the money of the Community Care Fund. If we are more efficient, perhaps we can extend the money to be used for a bit longer than 4 years. We also want to see if we want to include more projects for pilot arrangements that we want to test out that are good on paper. Please rest assured, however, we still have $6.9 billion in balance. According to our internal assessments, it can last for at least 4 years. Mr. Ip, any follow-up questions? None? It's now my turn to speak. We have seen a large number of projects being operated under the Community Care Fund. And I was a member at some point, and we have seen subsidies for transitional housing spanning across several terms of the Community Care Fund. We want to have service organizations providing support, and during the Wangford Court incident, the Community Care Fund played an important role. We have seen past contributions made by the Community Care Fund. I believe we recognize this. The balance will last for another 4 years. I think with the Community Care Fund playing such an important role before, perhaps we can consider extending the arrangements of a Community Care Fund. When I was a member, I was especially concerned about drug expenditure for cancer patients or patients of other diseases, and through the Community Care Fund, we can provide subsidized drugs and treatments. It's hard for us to stop subsidizing the patients, but we can perhaps consider providing cross-boundary healthcare, perhaps through the hospital authority. We have some collaboration with the Hong Kong U Shenzhen Hospital. Perhaps we can make use of healthcare vouchers with cross-boundary healthcare. We can also provide treatments or drugs. It may be hard for us to provide subsidies in the mainland because there are jurisdictional issues, but can we subsidize patients with serious illnesses in transportation? Perhaps each month we expect them to travel between the two places. We can provide them with rehab bus services so that patients can travel to Shenzhen in a more affordable manner for appropriate healthcare services. This can be an innovative approach. Would you consider this suggestion? Because we have a trend of patients from Hong Kong going to the mainland for medical treatment. Thank you. Secretary, I would first like to thank the chairman for your support of the work of the Community Care Fund. I will definitely convey your support to the internal staff of the Community Care Fund. I will see if the HA staff has any response for you. The question is not purely of medical assistance because it is about providing transportation subsidies. I'm not saying I will rule out the possibility with the Community Care Fund's projects. There are pilot projects that we want to test. We want to test the waters. We always want to be bold enough to try out different things. I will now see if the hospital authority staff has anything to add. Right now we have the pilot arrangements with Hong Kong U Shenzhen Hospital. We do not have any plans to test out cross-boundary healthcare in other areas. How about transportation services? If the Community Care Fund has transportation services, would that work?
Chairman, I think Well, transport may not have anything to do with the hospital authority. Well, as you just said, well, with regard to the youth living room, I dare not say that it's not feasible. But then for innovative ideas, you might also approach some business organization, and then you can also approach the relevant bureau for a discussion. I dare not say that they are not feasible, but then we will see if there is any duplication of work with the existing bureau or whatever. But then I don't think this is a question for the HA. Okay, thank you. Well, after I've drawn the line, I can see that Mr. Chen Yong would also like to ask questions. Well, then I'll give each of you 3 minutes, Maggie Chen, and then followed by Mr. Chen Yong. Yes, thank you. I'd like to follow up on the CSA residential care home scheme in Guangdong. Well, I'd like to commend the Bureau for this innovative idea because you have been able to think out of the box in introducing this policy so that Hong Kong's welfare will become portable, and that would also increase the setting where they can be used. I think that's to be commended. But then, given the fact the short period that it has been introduced, not that many people have benefited. But then, is it about time for you to consider how you can increase the incentives? Because for individual CSSA recipient, they are getting just $5,000 a month. They might worry that once they go to these residential care homes in Guangdong, whether or not the subsidies or allowance that they get might not be enough, and they also could see a stoppage of the subsidies that they are getting elsewhere. So can we further streamline this so that from the social workers' perspective, it might be easier for them to help the elders to apply for that? And also about publicity, can you step up publicity in order to publicize this pilot program so that they can also give it a try? Well, just a couple of weeks ago, I went to some GBA residential care homes. There was an exhibition on this. I can see that there are many institutions and many elders are also interested. And therefore, if they can give it a try by spending a few days there, I think it's a good idea. So, and of course, if there are more institutions taking part, then that would also be good if we can form a network. But of course, it would take a bit longer for us to do more encouragement and so on. But then if you're able to lower the threshold and if you're able to increase the incentives, given the fact that this is such a good idea, I think you should publicize it so that people will have a better idea about what it is, and then they can build their confidence in taking part. And also, starting from October 2025, you introduced this scheme. Only 5 people have benefited so far. And yet every month they are getting some $5,000 each. But then how come for the funding is as high as over $600,000? So how did you come up with this sum? Well, for the details, I'll ask the assistant director to explain. Yes, you're right, in the sense that this is a rather innovative project. So we'd like to give it a try, so that for CSSA recipients, well, if their health conditions are not that bad, but then their living conditions might not be that good, and therefore they can consider this. So Ms. Chan was right. So there are different factors affecting their decision. For example, their social network. They might also be worried about seeing a doctor. So, and of course, in Guangdong, we have also given them extra money, so they would have an extra several $1,000s more. We are not giving them more because if they live in Hong Kong, then the rent subsidy together with the portable CSSA payment would be about the same. But then if they live in Guangdong, then their living conditions will be a lot better. And therefore, for the details, I'll defer to my colleague. Please be brief. Yes, first, on the pilot scheme for elderly recipients, well, as I said, there are also experimental trips for the residents so that they can stay overnight, and then they be able to find out for themselves as to the kind of care provided by the institutes. So other than giving them the information, they can also experience that themselves by staying there a night or two. And then, well, in the table, it says that only 5 persons have benefited, and yet we have spent over $600,000 because we have an operator helping us so that they can provide support to these elderly recipients. And therefore, in terms of accepting application, receiving inquiries, and also communicating with the local elderly homes and so on, that organization will also have to get paid for the administrative cost that has been incurred. Next, Mr. Chen Yong. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Bureau Director. I have a concern as well as a recommendation. I can see that CCF has done a lot of good things. And in the paper, you also talk about the dental assistance service or scheme. Well, you have changed that into a health department dental assistance scheme. And according to the figures, last year, some 33,000 cases have completed treatment. I understand that there would also be follow-up. So have you been able to refer them to other schemes so that there would be a seamless transition for them to transfer to other schemes and then get proper treatment? Because we do have a shortage of dental service. And also, I have another group running the CLR project, and according to them, they are living in remote areas, and therefore you will have to make sure that they can also have passes for CLRs other than having access to CLRs in where they live. If they can also use the CLR in where they work, I think that would also be good because they'll be able to optimize the use of these resources, and also that would also help them. Can you consider that? Yes, Mr. Sun. Yes, on elderly dental service. I'll defer to the DFH. Thank you, Mr. Chen. You asked whether or not there can be a pass for the CLR. Well, I think these are nitty-gritty things, so this is rather innovative. So can you respond to that? Yes, thank you, Chairman. In fact, we have no restriction that the resident can only register with one CLR, but basically they would register themselves as members of a CLR in where they live, because the CLR would also provide living facilities, for example, kitchen, and also a place where kids can do their homework, and also a space where there can be family gatherings and so on. So basically, these would be done during spare time outside of work. And therefore, during daytime, when people are working, we have not really considered whether or not we should introduce this pass for them to use CLRs in different districts. Yes, on dental service. Yes, thank you for your question. Well, under the CCF, elders can also complete the project. Well, according to the figures that we have, what we have known so far is that eligible elders have already completed their first consultation early this year. In other words, dentists have already seen them. We are concerned about this to ensure, we would like to ensure that they be able to complete their treatment within appropriate time frame. Okay. So all the questions under this item have been asked, and we'd like to wrap up our discussion here. And thank you, Bureau Director and representatives from different departments for coming. Well, many have expressed concerns about the CLR project, so please do consider inviting us to pay a site visit. Okay, so we are now moving on to the second item. That's our latest progress in enhancing corporate governance of National Sports Association in Hong Kong. We're going to have a PowerPoint presentation, and Rosanna Law will be joining us. So Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism, and also Deputy Director for LCSD. We have also got the Vice President for the S7OC, the Honorary Secretary General, and also Mr. Kenneth Falk, our member, is also the Vice President of the S7OC. So we also have representative from the S7OC Hong Kong, China attending. So for those who would like to ask questions, please press the request to speak button now. All right. So the time is now handed over to Ms. Law, the Bureau Director. I understand you have a PowerPoint, so can you walk us through the paper and everything? Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, together with the SF&OC, the Vice President, Mr. Kenneth Kwok, and also other colleagues from the SF&OC, we are here to report to you on how we're going to enhance the corporate governance for NSA. So there have been a lot of progress and a lot of resources have been put into the NSAs by the government, and also Hong Kong athletes have also been able to get a lot of good results at major events, and Hong Kong has also become the primary location for many of these mega events. For example, Rugby 7 has just been held very successfully, and this morning we have already announced that during the summer months we have also got football teams, and they are going to play in one of our major programs, and I'll be giving the details later. So everything is developing very robustly. As the paper says, the NSAs play a very important role in promoting sports in Hong Kong, and as the community is becoming more enthusiastic about sports, the roles played by NSAs would also become more important, and therefore their operation and governance would also have to keep up with time, and they would also have to be improved, and through the LCSD we are offering assistance and support to the NSAs, and every year we would also be signing the subsidy agreement with them. We spell out it very clearly as to the terms that they will have to comply with and their obligations and so on. We would also be monitoring their operation, and on a regular basis we will also be organizing talks on enhancing internal control, and we have also issued guidelines and code of conduct to them. And the SF&OC is also looking at the organization structure, integrity, and also transparency and accountability mechanism and so on. Our requirements are becoming higher and higher, and SF&OC is also a member of the IOC, and together with other subsidiary organizations, they would also have to work as partners, and they would also have to collaborate with their subsidiary organizations in promoting sports development. And the SF&OC is also responsible for organizing the Hong Kong-China teams in participating in different sports events. And in 2020, we started to ask the SF&OC to comprehensively review and come up with plans as to how they can enhance the governance standards of NSAs. And in 2024, the review was completed, and then on the 20th of November that year, they've also released a report on the existing operation and review, and also the code of conduct that would have to be complied with by the NSAs. And by the end of this year, they would also have to fully implement the code. And then in the later report, we're going to report to you as to what has been done over the past year or so, as to how we have worked with the NSAs on enhancing their governance and also the progress that has been made so far. Before I defer to my colleague, I'd like to set out a few things with regard to how they can enhance their governance. First, we will have to set out very clearly as to our requirements on the NSAs, including the monitoring role to be played by the NSAs. That will have to be spelled out very clearly. For example, where there are complaints, and also where there are governance problems, how those can be resolved. And also all NSAs would also have to comply with the core governance requirements. And also the SF&OC and the LCSD would also have to work hand in hand in monitoring their operation, and there has to be a system, and also there has to be high efficiency. And the LCSD would also have to consider in approving block grants to these NSAs whether or not they have also got the certificates of compliance issued by the SF&OC. And the SF&OC would also have to review their governance standards every year, and they would also have to issue the certificate of compliance for that year. They would also have to continuously monitor the NSAs for their operation and so on. So I'll defer the time to my colleague from the SF&OC, and then I'll answer questions from members together with them.
Okay, hold.
Who's going to speak first? I will go first. Chair, members, good afternoon. I'm very glad to be here today as the Vice President of the SF&OC, along with others in the Federation and Committee to talk about what we have done in the past 1 or 2 years in corporate governance. We will give a PowerPoint presentation in due course, but I would first like to talk about some background information and the vision. The sports sector can reach the scale we're at today, especially with our athletes achieving great results. It is thanks to the selfless contributions made by different stakeholders, and the SFNOC is actually set up in the 1960s and 70s. We also have different sports with their different international bodies, Asian bodies. We have different rules to follow on the premise of promoting reforms of corporate governance. We need to make sure we respect and understand the different practices. We can't really adopt an across-the-board approach. With significant support from the government in sports in recent years, we have seen sports development in Hong Kong moving very rapidly, and the SFNOC has to follow the Olympic Charter. We are held accountable to the International Olympic Body. We also are responsible to society. In management, we must be more transparent and forward-looking. We have the support of one country, two systems. It is how we can have the athletes of Hong Kong compete in events as part of the Hong Kong-China delegation. We now practice a 5-pronged approach in developing sports. It helps us form a professional management system in future to tie in with development of sports in Hong Kong and the country. We have 70-odd, 80-odd NSAs, National Sports Associations. They have different rules and articles of association. We have to conduct a comprehensive review. We thank the government for trusting us in this exercise. But let me say this, let me clarify this. A lot of the NSAs are very committed to moving forward. We are united to become a professional industry and to polish the brand of sports in Hong Kong. This is continuous work, and we'll continue to enhance corporate governance of NSAs. I will now ask Ms. Ada Ching, Director of Corporate Governance Division of the SFNOC, to give the presentation. Thank you. I'm Ada, Director of the Corporate Governance Division. I am glad to be here today to brief members on what we've done in the past in enhancing corporate governance. Excuse me? Right. Let me first share with members some background information. We have the report and the Code of Governance being promulgated on the 20th of November 2024. All of the members of the SFNOC must comply with the code, and they must complete the review at the end of this year, early 2027, based on the findings of the reviews. We will issue certificates of compliance to confirm that the NSAs can continue to operate in future. Let me first take some time to explain what the code is about. The code is based on the ICAC's best practice reference for governance of national sports associations. The best practice reference was promulgated to promote sports and for the long-term development of sports in Hong Kong, to make sure we are making good use of government resources. There are 6 chapters to the reference. And we have, based on the priorities of the different chapters, we focus in the first phase, 2025, the first, third, and fifth chapters, because these tie in with the long-term development. Especially for the first chapter, it's about governance of the board of directors, because they are the top level of the associations. We need to make sure the top level is down. And of course, with the third chapter, selection of athletes, I'm sure you agree we have to have a fair and open process. As for the fifth chapter, it's also important in membership management. We have got in touch with the NSAs individually to see how they can follow up on the work, and we also have some assessment tools. After they have taken part in our workshop, they need to first complete this assessments. It's like a health check, and the NSAs are very compliant. They have submitted the completed assessments very soon. We are reviewing the completed assessments. While they have filled out the assessments, it does not mean they have completed relevant work. We will follow up with them and discuss with them to confirm the measures are implemented. In phase 2, that is this year, we will focus on the second, fourth, and sixth chapters. We're focusing on them later, not because they are less important. It's because for the first, third, and fifth chapters, it would take more time to complete the process. They would first need to amend the Articles of Association. They also need to submit the relevant documents to the company's registry, which is why we chose to implement measures in those chapters first. In January of this year, we held another workshop. The NSAs are actively following up on relevant work. Before, their codes of conduct may only cover directors and employees. This time, we have made it more comprehensive. It would include coaches, umpires, and other stakeholders. Right. So, we have more or less completed work in the 2 phases. We have, out of the 85 members, 61 of them receive annual subsidies, annual subventions from the government. Out of the 61 bodies, 54 of them have completed the assessments. The 7 of them gave justifications. Some of them are holding international events. They will complete them by the end of this month. We have 24 members not receiving subventions. 16 of them have submitted the assessments. For those who have not submitted assessments, we are actively following up on them. We do have a very small team. We want to make sure we have enough time to conduct reviews with them so that they have the time and that they also have time to implement improvement measures. I talked about the assessment tools earlier. What are they specifically? We have referred to the codes of different countries. We have those who are more advanced in sports, the US, Australia, Japan, even India. We have seen often they would ask their sports associations to work out something of their own in written documents. And from what we could see, they want to have clear points in the guidelines, bullet points, actions, so that it's easy to understand and it is easy to implement. There are also different items in chapter. Say for the first chapter on board of directors, there are 202 items covered, and there are 47 core governance competencies. We have also referred to laws such as the company's law or company's ordinance. We have had professors teaching relevant competences as well as some experts from KPAG to work out this code with us. We have in total 671 items and 191 core governance competencies. Ada, you have to really speed up. For each chapter, we have some specific points. Perhaps the members will refer to these specific points later. We often heard NSA say they do not have adequate resources, manpower, and otherwise. So we now have more support. We have worked with the ICC, Jockey Club, and other bodies to set up an alliance. We want to have cross-departmental and organizational support for NSAs. The Jockey Club has also disbursed a ceiling subsidy of $100,000 for them, for the NSAs to revise their codes. The Jockey Club also worked with the Hong Kong Institute of Corporate Governance to launch a sports governance certificate course, and we have 240 representatives from NSAs taking part in the course. On mediation and arbitration in sports, as we have seen the government actively promoting the relevant arrangements, we have 2 courses and relevant programs for the NSAs, and they find the courses to be quite useful because they can deal with complaints with the relevant arrangements. We have also been able to have free legal support from lawyers, very fortunately. We also plan to establish a complaints handling and disciplinary mechanism. We have conducted a review, and the finding is that we should establish relevant mechanisms. In future, we will have NSAs deal with complaints with the mechanisms. This is how we can ensure healthy development of sports. That's it from me. Thank you. We have 7 members who have pressed a request to speak, but Mr. Vincent Ching, Mr. Albert Trong, Mr. Ken Wong, Mr. Chris Ip, Mr. Adrian Ho, the Deputy Chairman, Dr. Elvin Lee, and myself. I also remind members that in accordance with the Rule 83 of the Rules of Procedure, if members have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest relating to the item, they should disclose the nature of the relevant interest before they speak on the item. Mr. Vincent Ching, I would first like to declare I am Deputy Chairman of the Hong Kong Sports Institute as well as the Deputy Chairman of the MMARC scheme. I have been working closely with many NSAs. I think many NSAs are more than willing to participate in the exercise, and we can see from the figures a lot of the NSAs have already completed relevant work, and I support the exercise because it will facilitate development of the sports sector. For those who have yet to complete such work by deadline, how you would deal with this? That's my first question. As for my second question, we want to make sure athletes are not affected in their competing in events or training. And I note in paragraph 23, if an NSA fails to provide a certificate of compliance, their funding may be reduced. How can we make sure in this event athletes will not be affected?
Bureau Director. Well, Chairman, I'm grateful to Mr. Chang for his concern. What we'd like to see is that the support for sports will not be reduced, and precisely because of that, every year, if you look at the funds that we have put in, exceed some $8 billion. This is not a small sum, and therefore corporate governance is even more important because of that. And I believe that we still have more than 6 months to go, and the SFNC has been working very hard, and with their hard work together with the NSA's efforts, I'm sure we should be able to meet the target. And for individual NSAs that have not been able to meet the target, we will have to find out why. And the LCSD absolutely does not want to affect the training of athletes or taking part in events and so on. But then we would also have to make sure that, the penalty and reward system are clear. And therefore, at this juncture, we're discussing this item so that the NSAs will be able to understand even more about the importance of this. I'll see if the SFNOC would like to add. Yes, I'd like to thank Mr. Chang for his encouragement, because the sports sector has put in a lot of efforts to do this. I think this is a very good and new attempt, and I've also thanked the government for its trust and support, because previously we did not have the COC, the Certificate of Compliance, at all, and therefore this is a new attempt and new venture. And I think the initial intention is the same, because we'd like to see an improvement in terms of corporate governance, and it's about feasibility, because as said, we must not affect the athletes when they take part in events or when they undergo training. And therefore, during the next 6 months or so, I think we are very positive. We'd like to encourage everyone to do a better job. Well, you might be worried that some have not been able to meet the target. It's about time. It's a matter of time, because they would have to change their articles of association. They would also have to make sure that competent persons can be appointed to the board. And I believe that in the next 6 months or so, a lot can be achieved. And therefore, I have a very positive attitude about this. So within the next 6 months or so, we'll be able to do a lot more. We'll be working closely with the LCSD and the Bureau, and we would also have to issue the deadline, so that by the time when we have to issue the COC, we will see how that can be implemented. Thank you. Next, Mr. Albert Chuang. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, with regard to enhancing the corporate governance for the NSAs, I support it. I can see how it's implemented according to the paper. Some 40% of the NSAs have already achieved some 80% of the core competence requirements, and I think that's very good. Well, for the 85 NSAs, they have to undergo review and reform. That's a mammoth task, and therefore, we must not underestimate the difficulty. And have you estimated the extra work that would be required? Have you provided extra support for them? And also, I've noticed that in the community, there are many who claim themselves to be NSAs, but then they are actually not member associations of the SFNOC, and they are not eligible to send athletes to take part in the Asian Games or the Olympics. But then they've already signed contracts with the athletes. Sometimes athletes might be misled into signing the contract, and therefore unhappy incidents have happened. So would you be doing a bit more in terms of regulation, so that only eligible NSAs can call themselves NSAs? Yes, Ms. Law. I think I'll have to find out from Mr. Chuang as to what associations you're referring to. In particular, you also refer to certain associations that have signed contracts with some athletes. So it's not just about the naming of the associations, because right away we will see what action can be taken against them. So after the meeting, if Mr. Chuang can provide us with further details, that will help. As to whether or not we will need to change the rules and regulations and so on, well, in Hong Kong, NSAs will have to set up in accordance with the Olympic Charter before they can take part in events and games and so on. So I'm sure there will definitely be relevant rules and regulations that can apply. And then for resources, maybe SFNOC can supplement. Yes, Mr. Kenneth Falk. Yes, there are several aspects. In terms of manpower, when we embarked on this job, many said that we might not have adequate manpower for that, and definitely we try to look for community resources. For example, the Hong Kong Jockey Club has been very supportive. So despite the fact that the resources are limited, still they are helpful. So that has helped us in embarking on the job. And of course, we treat NSAs as our partners, and therefore we are trying our best to help them. And we have also got pro bono lawyers and also accountants to help them. And depending on the needs and demands, we hope that more people can help. Secondly, I'm also aware of the fact that Mr. Chuang also referred to something happening in the community, because for sports events there are rapid developments, and there are also emerging sports that are becoming popular, and therefore under the company ordinance we cannot regulate how companies can be set up, because companies can be set up under the company's ordinance. They have their autonomy, but then they must not duplicate the names of some existing sports associations and so on. But then precisely because of that, sports are developing very rapidly in our community, but some athletes or even parents are not clear about what this association is doing. Well, they are not clear whether or not they can become Hong Kong teams to represent Hong Kong, or whether or not this association is responsible for a particular sport. Well, please approach us. The SFNOC will be more than happy to help. We can explain to you as to what these associations are. And the SFNOC's website has also listed out all our member associations, so they are indeed our members. And for those that are not listed there, it doesn't mean that they are not promoting the development of sports, but then if you have any queries, you can just approach us. All right, thank you, Mr. Chuang. After the meeting, if there are any controversies, please refer them to the administration. Next, Mr. Ken Wong. Thank you, Chairman, the SFNOC. Well, in August 2025, you work with the ICAC and the Jockey Club, and also the sports and also the Hong Kong Institute of Corporate Governance. You have set up the Sports Governance Integrity Alliance. You have also offered some certification courses and also the Certificate of Compliance program. And then in March 2026, some professional training programs have been offered by the Alliance. So in terms of the number of applications and the amount that has been approved, and also the progress, and also the participation rate and cost effectiveness, and also are you going to expand the scope or coverage of the course, and also are you going to enhance the curriculum of the program, and so on. So can you tell us more about them? Thank you for your question. First of all, well, for the $100,000 funded by the Jockey Club, that's the cap, and it's for the entire year. We have received inquiries from different NSAs as to how they can put in their applications. Now 4 have submitted their applications. And in our circulars, we have also set out very clearly that they cannot use that for procurement of commodities, so they can only use that for hiring services. For example, they can get accountants to help them check their accounts and so on, and they can also improve their systems and so on. Anything that you'd like to add, Mr. Wong? Yes, since I have some time left, I'd like to ask one more question. It's about the Kai Tak Sports Park. Well, after it's been commissioned, many major sports events or mega events have been held there, and then you will also have to rely heavily on the support of the NSAs. So my question is about the corporate governance of NSAs. If they have not been able to meet the target, and if we are not able to make good use of the venue, or we have not been able to check the eligibility of the participating organizations and so on, what kind of risk would that entail? Thank you, Secretary. Well, anybody can apply to hire venues in the KTSP for use. As to whether or not they'll get approval, or will they be able to get any funding support from the administration, that would depend greatly on their ability in hosting the event, and whether or not their proposal is feasible, and also whether or not the event itself is attractive. And of course, if they have a track record for us to see, then of course that would be good. And if they are NSAs, then of course they would also have an edge in certain matters. But then, as the SFNOC has said, well, there are over 80 member associations under them. Well, it doesn't mean that every one of them will have the ability to organize or host such events, and whether or not they'll be able to get funding support. That would depend on whether they are able to host such events. Taking the Rugby 7 as an example, they have already got a track record of 50 years, and therefore their ability has been certified, and therefore they'll be able to get a bit more support than others. But then in terms of corporate governance for the NSAs, after they have completed their review, after we have seen that if there is still room for improvement, then we would not rule out the possibility as to whether or not we are going to continue to give them support in organizing such events later. Thank you. Next, Mr. Chris Ip, thank you. Concerning the SFNOC's effort to enhance the corporate governance of NSAs, well, task force has been set up and a lot of work has been done, and I fully confirm their efforts, and I appreciate that. Out of the 6 core competencies, well, for umpiring, coach management, and also board governance, I think in terms of the achievement rate, 60% or below 60% is on the low side. I'd like to find out why. And also, well, just now, Mr. Fox said that he's confident that by the end of the year, most of them would be able to meet the target. But what if they are not able to do so? Then what about the funding that they can get? Will there be calculation formula that would suggest that that would be proportional to the extent that they have been able to meet the targets? Thank you, Chairman. Well, the principle is, of course, that if they are not able to meet the target, then we will try to find out why. And then we hope that the SFNOC can help the NSA to achieve the target, because we don't want to see a large number of NSAs not meeting the targets. And therefore, between now and the end of the year, we'll be working closely with the SFNOC to see how we can help their NSAs. But then if they are still not able to meet the target no matter what, we're talking about early next year when the COC will be issued. And then by then we'll be taking a fresh look at how they stand. As I said, the LCSD will consider how that can be dealt with, whether or not their funding should be cut. But then that would not be done overnight across the board, because we have to be realistic. We have to take care of the need of athletes in terms of training and taking part in competition and so on. And then I'll see if the SFNOC has anything to add. But as we can see, for coaches and umpires, a lot of work is involved. We will look at the registration system and also qualification, verification, and also whether or not the distribution of work is appropriate, and also whether or not the database has been set up. Well, as has been said, individual NSAs have their own background. Some might have been set up by enthusiasts, and they have contributed their lives to the sports sector. But then it would take some time for them to comply with the new standards and criteria. I'll see if the SFNOC has anything to add. Okay, I'll try my best, and then if there is anything that I miss out, then my colleagues can supplement. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Ip for his support for our work. Well, first on board governance and also coach management. Well, on board governance, my understanding is that it goes back to this original intention. Everybody is willing to do a good job, but then it's about time. That is about how long it will take. For example, they will have to go through AGMs, EGMs, and sometimes they will also have to make amendments to their articles of association. And according to my understanding, a lot is underway. They are doing that already. And also it's about the arrangement of certain stakeholders and so on. Well, with professionalization and also popularization, I think a lot needs to be done, and we would see how we can select the right person to the right job. And then on coach management, if you understand it properly, well, in the past, the standards of coaches varies. But then individual NSAs would also have a different system on management of coaches. So in some cases, you don't need to have a coach to teach the trainees, and therefore individual sectors would have different needs and requirements, and therefore we will have to help them set up a training and management system for coaches and so on. That would take time. So we have the resolve to do it, and that's also a very important part of our future work. We hope that in terms of coaches, we will do an even better job in the future. Thank you. Yes?
局長講
Mr. Ip, something to add? Right. We have still 46% of the NSAs that have not implemented fully the measures. How can we make sure by the end of this year we will have them implement the measures fully? The specific work will be undertaken by the SFNOC. As the Vice President said, for EGM or AGMs to be held, once they are held, they can probably implement a lot of the measures already. If they have to set up a new system, or if they have trouble, or if they need to have more directors on the board, or they need to replace those on the board, there's still a few months for them to make it happen. We also have lawyers providing free legal advice, and we can also provide the NSAs with different kinds of support. Mr. Adrian Ho. Thank you, Chair. I very much support the exercise to enhance corporate governance of NSAs in Hong Kong. This is healthy for the development of the sports sector, and this has received support of citizens. The LCSD will link funding for NSAs based on the fact that whether the NSAs have obtained the certificates of compliance. So athletes will be directly affected by this as well. If NSAs cannot obtain certificates of compliance, would you be able for the in compliance only suspend funding for a few months, for the months of incompliance, so that not the whole of the annual funding will be taken away? I also want to ask what criteria the government will adopt in activating the different mechanisms. For example, the disciplinary mechanism. We will see the launch of the sports mediation and arbitration arrangements. How can we encourage NSAs to make use of the arrangements? Thank you, Ms. Rosanna Law. Thank you. I will first give a brief response, and then I will ask the LCSD director to provide more information. We will not cut off funding in whole simply because the NSA does not have a certificate of compliance, because we understand there is a significant impact on the athletes as well as coaches and umpires and other staff members of the NSAs. As for when we will activate the mechanisms, including when we will deploy observers to boards, for the SFNOC, they have in their plan to include in NSA's articles and associations to strengthen the regulatory role of SFNOC. If governance issues of NSAs cannot be improved after a certain period of time or there are some serious incidents, the SF and OC will issue a warning. And after issuing the warning, if there is no improvement, observers will be deployed to the board of directors. The most extreme situation, of course, we don't want that to happen, but should that be the case, we can take over the operations of the NSAs. Thank you. Ms. Winnie Cho. Thank you. We do practice prudent finances with the disbursement of annual subvention for NSAs. We have been working out the specific arrangements with the SF and OC. Of course, like the Deputy Chairman said and other members said, we want NSAs to rectify the different issues as soon as possible. We believe with us encouraging NSAs to rectify the issues early on, they will be able to receive subvention as normal. Speaker's microphone was not on. Well, I think the question of the member is very much valid. The SF and OC has a partnership with the government, and NSAs are able to get government resources because they are members of the SF and OC. If there are serious incidents, there is no other mechanism for us to cancel or suspend their membership. And obviously we don't want to activate this because with the cancellation or suspension of membership, it will affect athletes' participation in events. It can also affect the relationships between these associations with regional and global bodies. So we are not first considering kicking them out of the league. It's more about helping them enhance governance. This is the intent. I will see if my colleague has anything to add. Mr. Edgar Yang, thank you. Chair, we have actually done something similar before. We have had to quote the Olympic Charter. Often we think the rectification is limited to the management level. We can see that they could not observe certain couldn't identify problems, or they could not focus on improvement. And we have at one point suspended membership of an association for 2 years, and we have deployed observers to monitor their operations. Afterwards, we have restored their membership. This is how we can take care of the situation. All right, the last one to speak would be me. If after I speak, no other member has requested to speak, it will be the end of the discussion of this item. I have several questions. The first is on the fifth point in the PowerPoint presentation. It did say some NSAs are subvented by the LCSD and some are not subvented by the LCSD. I want to ask, are there sports associations who are not members of the SF and OC but are receiving LCSD subvention? In future, how are we going to deal with these bodies? Should we include them in the same governance system? Second, there should be a strong partnership so that NSAs receiving LCSD subvention will comply with the requirements and obtain certificates of compliance. I believe with certificates of compliance, not only will it guarantee that they will receive subvention, it will also give them some priority in, say, allocation of venues. So apart from hard money, will we have other incentives for sports associations or perks for sports associations holding certificates of compliance? Third, this exercise is huge, and we have now more or less some very high standards. I want to ask, how is the exercise viewed in the international sports arena and by the mainland? Lastly, we have 191 core governance competencies. The competencies where if they are not met, it will be the case that the Bureau would find, or the SFNOC would find it unacceptable, that they would have to reject them altogether. Chair, I would first want to say we have 62 NSAs receiving LCSD subvention, and we have 20 NSAs receiving subvention from the LCSD for individual projects. With the subvention program of the LCSC, an important factor for consideration of eligibility is an association being a member of the SFNOC. I will now let the LCSD director supplement the information. Regardless of whether one is a member of SFNOC, there are 20 bodies receiving subventions from the LCSC, and again, regardless of whether they are a member of SFNOC, they need to sign an agreement with the LCSC. There are some requirements on internal monitoring, transparency, staff recruitment, etc., that the bodies have to follow. The LCSC practices almost as the same level of regulation for these bodies. We also monitor their annual activities. We also scrutinize their year-end plans. We even deploy officers to their activities to monitor their operations. We are considering having certificates of compliance issued to these bodies as well, but they will still be under the regulation of the LCSC. On overall governance or directors, we actually make an annual we actually receive their annual reports. We also cover these bodies with the course we have with the Hong Kong Institute of Corporate Governance. These 20 bodies, along with those FNOC members receiving LCSD subvention, if they obtain certificates of compliance, they will get their subventions. They will be accorded priority with venues, rentals in LCSD. They will also have priority in renting school premises and other premises relevant to the work of the LCSD, but they need to raise the requests 3 months in advance. While these bodies may not be members of SFNOC, they are helping with sports promotion. So with the renting of venues to these bodies, we will need to make sure we look at past records to see if they have made good use of the venues before and whether it really helps with development of sports in the city. Yes, something to add, Mr. Kenneth? Yes, the vision of the exercise is very clear. We have 85 NSAs. We have 61 subvented by the LCSD, 24 of them not. but we ask all of them to follow the rules. So even we can't have someone say, I'm not receiving government money, so I don't have to do this. We have also bodies associations who are not receiving LCFC subvention that are more than willing to participate because they think it is a responsibility of the sports sector and they should be held accountable to society. As for what the chairman asked about what is done internationally, we have 206 sports associations in different parts of the world, and I would say from what I heard in the past, we are a pioneer. We have not had that many sports associations undergoing health check. So how we're going to do relevant work and how we can tell good stories of it, I have been thinking about this. We have 206 SFNOCs from different parts of the world. We have invited them to come to Hong Kong to hold this annual conference so that we can share with them our experience on enhancing corporate governance. This is actually a direction that the International Olympic Committee is taking. We can share our experience in exchanges. Thank you.
時間亦都去
I think we will wrap up our discussion on this item here. And once again, I'd like to thank the Bureau Director together with her team for attending. Next item, AOB. If there is nothing, then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.